we do have 89 people who are now waiting eagerly for any word on the Apple III.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so hello everybody. This is I guess there are probably a number of people tuning in. Although this was supposed to be kind of like an informal little meeting rather than a an actual sort of organized session. So if you are, so the concept of this is just kind of like people sitting around in a room. In fact, I would like to probably grid myself after a while, but rather than be big in everyone's view. But
yeah, I can change that.
Okay. But yes, I mean, if you would like to, I know, I'm expecting that there will be a couple of people that are interested in this, but basically this was just going to be sitting around in a room talking about the Apple III in various ways before things start in an hour. So this is kind of like, waiting for things to begin. This is not things beginning. So, okay, so the first thing is I would like to be not entirely alone in this room. So if there are sort of, people who are interested in kind of like talking about the Apple III, I guess raise your hand and I'll see if I can get you into the room. I think I have that ability. Oh, okay. So this is just as a mention, I think this is not going over YouTube, and we're not sure what the eventual state, the eventual fate of this is going to be. So it's possible that people will be able to see this into the future, but at least everyone in the Zoom room can see you. So,
Paul, I'm promoting people if you want to just keep.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I was just looking over there as well.
And I'm just promoting anybody who raises their hand. So anybody who accidentally raises their hand, you're going in, and you got to talk about the Apple III.
That's right. That's your penance.
Ask a question about the Apple III?
Sure.
Right. Or like now.
Yeah.
I
mean, like.
So.
KansasFest.
So a few years ago, Martin Hay hacked out how to manipulate the Satan mode of the Apple III, correct? Mm-hmm. So one thing I'm curious about is, does that mean that you can, has that been taken to a point where it's like, okay, I can now emulate an Apple II with more than 48K of memory?
I don't think so. It's, yeah, so my understanding of that, the Satan mode thing is essentially, there's a little backstory to it, but it's, essentially the Apple III is more powerful than the Apple II in general. It has more RAM and various other things, but it doesn't have a lot in ROM, and so in order to do the Apple II emulation, it has sort of hardware support for swapping in, like loading up the ROMs and then swapping in where the soft switches are and stuff like that. And Satan mode was basically I forget if it was. I think it was called silly mode in most of the things I've seen internally, but okay. Essentially the idea is that it's instead of it's giving yourself access to the whole Apple III.
Right. So like in an Apple II environment, you have access to all the Apple III resources in theory.
Yeah. And the trickiest part about that is like the soft switches and stuff, which aren't in the same place.
That's right? What I was curious about.
So it's, I think the memo that was about this, basically, the internal memo said we don't really want the public to be able to do this because this is going to be a support nightmare.
Okay. Yeah.
But so I'm pretty sure that what Martin did, I think he got it sort of functioning, but I don't think it's really functioning much more than much more than it kind of was in theory.
Than it was in implementation.
Yeah, I think people had done this before. Somebody claimed, I think, to have been able to get even like Flight Simulator running in this mode, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, it's delicate.
But like nobody's done a new version of the Apple II boot floppy that gives you a better Apple II.
No, I don't think so. It does seem like it seems like you could get close, but the problem is that the Apple II was Wild West programming days, where if it was in ROM, you just trusted it was going to be there.
Right, that makes sense.
So, the Apple III they were trying to kind of get you to use drivers and
Yeah, no, of course they didn't want you doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they tried to make it future proofed in a way, but if you want to run Apple II
Well,
stuff,
that worked out well.
yeah, it was a pretty cool setup, but
All right.
but
Cool.
yeah, it did.
Thanks. I enjoyed your presentation yesterday. I thought it was it was good. I don't have an Apple III, so it was good to just like get a good refresher. The yeah.
Yeah, well, it kind of struck me that we really are kind of in a time when we can start using a lot of people are developing for the Apple II, but that's leading over to the Apple III as well. So,
how good are the emulators for Apple III?
There's basically one, which is MAME, and it's good because our Belmont is making it good.
Okay. Well, I mean, of course, somebody has to make it good.
Yeah, he's spent a lot of time trying to make sure that all the sort of like little undocumented things work, and that was the thing. Like even it didn't work for a long time because like none of them worked. There were a couple.
Well, it wasn't a super well documented machine by Apple, also, right? Isn't that part of the problem?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So someone basically like noticed, I think, in the source code, some reference to a particular way that like the 0 page was handled when you're doing memory addressing, and suddenly that people understood why Business Basic was crashing and stuff. That was a big problem actually. Business Basic wouldn't run, and everybody wrote everything in Business Basic, so wasn't that helpful.
Does
Open Emulator?
Open Emulator. Yeah.
All right, Martin, show us what you got.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I see. You're playing. You're in fact playing Martin's Hagstrom.
I saw Chris's link, and now things are happening. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you like using the Apple III beyond it just being an interesting curio?
I admit I have not gotten to a point where I really do. I would like to, but I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious
because I sort of feel like there's a lot of there's not that much fun stuff to do on it. I mean, like except to develop. I think that once people start developing fun things to do on it.
Well, I liked when you were talking about like using a 65802 or whatever, and I'm like, that would be like, didn't you mention that in your presentation?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think it could get much more niche than coding for 65802 in an Apple III. It's like you're coding for an audience of one.
Well, there's a big software company called big for the Apple III called On3. They did a lot of stuff, and that was essentially Bob Consorti. So he was the guy behind the company, and he and his team had a software development system that used the 802. So cool. And it's in his basement, and somewhere,
course. Right, as I would expect. There's that's a very elite platform.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. Thank you for the info and for the presentation.
Yeah. Jorma mentioned that Open Emulator too. That and by the way, hello Jorma.
Is Open Emulator still supported?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Or at least there's some icons there, but the actual code is missing or something wrong.
Yeah, it's there was somebody who did a lot of work on it. I've forgotten his name, Riesel, I think, who kind of started the project initially.
Right.
And then he just kind of got tired of it, as that's what happens with emulators.
As happens in this community. Mine too. People keep emailing me, asking me when I'm going to update A2 server. I'm like, I don't know, maybe one of these days.
Yeah, I know. I was just days ago going through your pages from 5-6 years ago or whatever.
I actually am hoping to put out an updated version, not of A2 Cloud, but of A2 Server and Raspberry 2 in the next month or so, because it's overdue.
Yeah. Hey, Mike.
Hey, I didn't know if I should just talk or what.
That's fine.
Hello. So, in light of the new, the new ROM that just came out that allows booting to the hard drive, I don't understand the restrictions on Apple II mode. And do you think that something that can change in the ROM would actually allow more of it to work with the Apple III?
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry. I noticed my screen says Kerry Justice, but that's because I've pinched my wife's laptop. Because I've only had if you use the web version of the Zoom, it's Robert Justice here.
there we go.
You don't get the panel of video up. You can't get the Brady Bunch view up.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a bit hard to sort of follow what people are on. I noticed that when I did the test run the other day. So yeah.
Wait, so what was that again?
So in the web version of the client, you didn't seem to be able to get the video multi-video up. Yeah.
Yep, and I have no control over that either. So normally I can change it so people I'm kind of forcing everybody to be on the grid view, but only if you're using the desktop app.
Right.
I see.
Okay.
It's just
because I use my sort of work laptop and it's locked out. We're not allowed to put Zoom on that.
Yep.
So,
There's nothing I can do about it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So good morning from me anyway.
Yeah. Oh, glad you can make it. I
must say something about the Apple III now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in fact, you're the like, the coding celebrity of the Apple III of late. So what is I mean, the ROM is basically the replacement ROM you have is largely just a boot thing, right?
It's interesting because the ROMs are probably a small part of it. But sort of back on Mike's question, there's probably not much more Apple II wise that you can do. The biggest limitation is it doesn't have the language card support. So then it's just a 48K Apple II. I mean, it's got all this banked memory, but you just can't use it like a normal Apple II program would use. So, and you can see that like in MAME, if you use my ROM and setup, and if you reboot into like emulation mode, you can actually reboot that hard disk, try and start ProDOS, and it'll just stop because it just says I need 64K memory. So that's the biggest limitation, and it's a bit odd that Apple never. I mean, they obviously just made a decision that they didn't want to add some extra logic to support that. I mean, the RAM was there in the computer. It had 256K or 128K probably initially, and less. So they probably just made that decision not to add that in, and it's a bit of an odd one, really, at that time. I suppose because it started development very early on, that's probably its biggest issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny how old it is.
Yeah, like I think if you would be interesting to sort of timeline it as to when the development of it started and where the Apple II Plus was. Like, was it just coming out, or was it sort of out for a little while? It's a bit tricky to say there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think most of those documents are like 1979 or something like that. I mean, like, so it's pretty early.
It is, yeah.
I mean, I guess it's basically like right when the disk drive was. Come to think of it.
Yeah. Because that decision to put the floppy inside it, and then to boot off the floppy mostly and have a small boot ROM was probably a sort of almost a forward-thinking way of running. Boot the operating system, boot as much as you can off the floppy, and then you can change it and do whatever you want. Yeah, but I suppose things moves on that quick that that hamstrung it. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that they committed enough to, like, they felt the RDBTS was stable enough that they put it in ROM. I mean,
yeah, it's interesting. And that was, I had a bit of a look this week, and I didn't really fit the Hackfest criteria, but I had a bit of a look, and I think I chatted just a quick message with Yorma about this, but 4AM was showing this Holodesk thing. He re-showed that tweet where it boots up a disk image. So I did a little bit. If you scroll back in the 3s, there's a quick little video back at the start of that, and I did a little bit of a try to do that and read a PO image and boot it. So actually, the atomic defense, it actually, I got it to the point where it'll run that, but it calls the block IO routine in the ROM to read a block off disk. So that's the only thing it uses. So it's quite an easy sort of patch. Like I just hand patched the disk in, I think it was about 5 spots to point to my new sort of read routine, and then it booted up okay. But it's interesting that what I wanted to get to, the floppy driver in the Apple III actually sort of hooks into all the different routines in the ROM, the pre-nibble, post-nibble, I think, into parts of it. So it's like they didn't want to commit to just use that block IO. They wanted to do things a little bit differently, but use parts of the ROM. So it does use some of the ROM. So it's a bit of an odd decision. Yeah.
Well, my impression was that they were definitely. I mean, so this came up I think in the Satan mode document too. That they were trying to get people not to rely on stuff being in just undocumented spots in ROM. I mean, like you have a bunch of places you're supposed to call those places, and we will not guarantee that anything in ROM is still where you thought it was.
Yeah. Yep.
So there are a couple of things that people are asking in the chat. Antoine was asking about whether, let's see, he said, I understand that Apple, maybe you guys can see this too, I'm not sure, but I understand that
put it up. Yeah.
Apple III internal documentation still to be unearthed. And how would one try to dig them out from Apple HQ?
It's interesting. I think, and that's probably what slowed the Apple III down, I think, was the documentation. Was pretty bad, I think, when it came out. So I think if the documentation that's there today, like, sorry, I'm just going to reach up above my desk here. So, like these SOS reference manuals, there's SOS reference manual 1 and 2. They weren't available when it came out, and I think these are sort of like the 3+ era sort of look to the book. So like, I mean, I've been using these, and then there's the device driver writer's guide. So those 3 books together, like, if I've been doing any of what I've been doing, that's what I need to do it, and that wasn't available for the first, probably, I would say, a couple of years of the Apple III's life.
Yeah, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, that probably impacted it immensely. Yeah.
Well, and I think so. We have a lot of what we have now is due to what's his name, David C. Craig?
We meant to ask. See if we could find out a little bit of the history of him. I don't know if anyone on here knows anything about him, but yeah.
That's been super useful. Like all he scanned all these internal documents, and that's the thing. I think like the developers never had this stuff, right? I mean,
all I
like,
know about
the source
David
code
Craig is that he's copied a lot of everything about everything. He sent me a whole bunch of stuff regarding Apple II history years ago, both on paper and on disk. So he's just a collector of documents. I don't know much more about him than that, but he's been very helpful.
Yeah, no, he's been a total godsend in this community.
So do you know if he's still around, or have you been in contact with him recently at all, Stephen?
I'd have to look back and see when is the last time I got an email from him. I think it's been a number of years, but we probably haven't had reason to communicate for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah. Like Paul said, there's so much that he's saved, and if we didn't have that, we'd be really stuck. Yeah. We wouldn't be able to get anywhere.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess as far as Antoine's question, I don't know what's hiding there. There's the Stanford has a lot of documentation that was donated by Apple. So there's a big sort of inventory of things that they have, and Martin Hay went at one point a couple of years ago to look up something. I think he was looking up something specific about the like RF shielding or something like that. But so the procedure is you find the document in the list of documents that exist, you submit your request, and then they put you in a a little room with it. You know, you're not. I think you're not even supposed to like take pictures of it. Like it's all very archival, so it's they're not going to let you take it out and scan it. But I guess if there are things that we know exist and would be relevant, we could conceivably go through this procedure to see something. I feel like we didn't quite actually make it back to the Open Emulator thing, which is just that Open Emulator was like I think the Apple III was working on it. I think David Schmidt said that he was doing some testing with it and got it working in earlier versions, but then it was basically like the code was refactored in order to do the video for the Apple II, and that it basically just didn't get ported back to the Apple III. So like the code for the Apple III is in there, but the display doesn't work. And I fiddled with it just a little bit once to try to see if I could make it work easily, but it didn't. It wasn't simple. But yeah, I think Open Emulator could do the Apple III if that bit was fixed, and then the memory access thing that got MAME working was fixed. So. Yeah.
So just yeah, sorry, I was just. Where's that with now? That Open Emulator, is it just stuck sitting somewhere? Is anyone looking after it at all, or not? It's just parked as a project, or
it's on GitHub, so you can and there's a small community of people who are contributing to it. So every like 6 months or something, I get a number of little alerts from GitHub that people have submitted, updates. But yeah, I think if anyone wants to do that and has the time to do it, I think it's available to get the Apple III working. Okay. And the interface would be nice. I mean, like MAME is nice, but I'm still not very used to the working with the interface that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I drive it purely with that command line interface, and once you get your head around that, it's okay, it's fine. But yeah, it's interesting. At least it works. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone was mentioning. Patrick was mentioning in the chat window that there aren't a lot of crackers for Apple III software, but the applesauce and Woz does at least buys us some time, that we can image these things. I think Martin also did like a cracking session, but Rob, you looked into it a bit, right?
Yeah, so there was that, and that was quite an interesting discovery. Like I bought a copy of VisiCalc, Advanced VisiCalc. And then I proceeded to just make a .dsk image of the disks and try and use them. They wouldn't boot up. And yeah, one thing led to another, and that's on my blog. Maybe I can chuck a link to that after. And so I think around the same time I happened to be looking at that was then when that those big bunch of documents, those SS Safe or something like that.
Oh, yeah, right.
Remember those documents? There was that big pile of documents that was supposedly found in some store somewhere or something that, I don't know, someone must have thrown out, or I'm not sure whether that was a good story to cover the fact that they were leaked out. I don't know, but they were old documents. But if you read through those documents, they were quite interesting that Apple was going to provide copy protection baked into operating systems ready for their customers, and then they would provide the copy protection to the customers for the software. So when I dug a bit further, and the clue that got me able to work out what was going on was there was this driver by On3, the uncopy protect driver, which they actually released a driver to get around the copy protection of these programs. And I'm assuming that was done later in the Apple III's life when there wasn't the push, and I suppose people were just trying to run it and keep the Apple III going as long as they could. But yeah, it turns out that SOS, and I think from about SOS 1.1 and 1.3 had this copy protection ability built into the operating system. and it uses the volume headers on certain sectors. It reads 8 tracks in a row, and they have to be synced to bring the volume numbers in, and then it creates a key, and it actually decodes the well, on Apple III, it's called the interpreter, the application. So it's encrypted when it's put on the disk, so you can read it and it boots fine. And then the first sort of 3 bytes are a jump to the reset vector. So after that, it decrypts it, and then it actually patches that front end in to jump to the actual start address of the code, and then runs it. So to have that sort of unknown that was built into SOS was quite interesting. Yeah. So that decode, like, you can get around that. You can. I did it for one of the interpreters on that one of the disk images I provided, and it would be nice to, it's just a matter of grabbing that code that it uses to decrypt and put it in a separate program, and then we could make a decryptor, I suppose. But I think I did start it up and used the MAME debugger and stopped it at the point and did a memory dump and sort of decoded it that way. But yeah, so.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, I mean, like that's one thing that's kind of, if it turned out that a lot of people used Apple's own protection, then, we might be in luck, because if we crack that, then we cracked them all.
I think that's right. And it seemed like quite a lot of them use that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see too many that didn't use that same key. There's like one key that VisiCalc, Apple Writer, quite a few use. So, but there is other copy protection out there. I think those PFS programs, they have some sort of copy protection that's different. So there is some work needed to work around that. Yeah.
Mark mentioned in the comments that OpenEmulator can do WAS files now for the Apple II. And actually, that was one of the reasons I started using it initially, was that it had support for the EDD format, basically. Sort of conceptual precursor to WAS in a sense. But so that was, OpenEmulator has always been pretty good about that disk access stuff. And then Kat in the chat also asked about the Lisa having built-in copy protection, and I think that's there was something like the video ROM had a serial number that they applied when you installed the applications. So the Lisa also had Apple sanctioned. I mean, the only software for the Lisa was practically Apple's anyway, but like your copy of the system software was actually locked to your machine.
Yeah.
So. I forget, are there any parentheses open still?
There was a question about the character ROM and the loading of that. So yeah, that's another feature that the Apple III has that I've probably dug into a little bit recently as well, just due to the fact that when I was trying to write this ROM edition and the updated SOS, that in MAME, I kept getting corrupted characters quite a bit, and I would stick it on disk and go to the real hardware, and it would work quite well. So it actually uses the screen holes to load the character ROM, and the bit that I didn't appreciate, and I took a little while to get my head around, was that it's a bit hard to describe, but in the screen of the Apple II and the Apple III is the same. It's this sort of 3 segments as it scrolls down the screen. But the other bit to that is that the 4th segment is the VBL period while it's blanking. And that's when it actually reads those, it actually scans those screen holes in memory throughout that 4th period. So there's just a soft switch on the Apple III. You turn that soft switch on, and then as it scans through that VBL period, it reads those screen holes. And one byte from screen page 1 is the address of the ROM in the RAM you want to write, and then the other one is the data. So it's quite that was quite an ingenious little way of fitting in a way of using the video scanning and those screen holes to fill the character ROM.
Mm-hmm.
But it does mean that ROM has to have a character set in it, because when you turn the computer on, You can't see, unless you load that character set, you can't get any legible text out of the Apple III. And I think that's why people battle so much, is that if the machine won't run and the processor won't run, then you're not going to get a legible display out of an Apple III. And that's a big part that's tricky to debug an Apple III, hardware-wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think someone was just recently talking about, trying to solve video issues, and I mean, like, there are a number of causes of those. That once you can't see the screen, the disk drive's whirring. What does this mean? So,
yeah.
Let's see. That's some. Trying to keep track of the things that were going by in the chat. As far as Antoine, I think, mentioned something about like a lot of Apple III software not being preserved. I had claimed that, but I mean, like, I think an applesauce image counts as preserved. It's just that I think there's a lot of software that's just going to be hard to find, because I have the example I have that sort of epitomizes this for me is the dental office. I forget what it is. Like, it's I forget even what it's called, but it's like software to run a dentist's office on the Apple III. And I think there's also some, like, farm management software and things like that. And it's like, it's unlikely that anyone kept those. So, and there weren't many to begin with. So, in that sense, I think there's a fair amount of, things that are a high proportion of things that were written for the Apple III didn't make it to the point where we can preserve them. But we certainly don't want to, if we find them, we don't want to sit around and crack them first. We want to image them now, crack them later.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Paul, that, so much of that is very specialized software. And I think there was Anthony Beckett had some profile that he picked up in Melbourne here, and it turned out it was from some computer store. And I think there was some posts on there, and I had a bit of a dig around, and it was an accounting package on there. And I mean, that's probably, I can't imagine that company sold many copies of that package. It was an Australian company that wrote an accounting package and sold it for the Apple III. So yeah, that would be a pretty small market, I would have thought. That one did rate a mention in that there's an Apple III resource guide. That resource guide has a big list of software, and it was in there. So I think if we'll struggle to find the software that's on that list because of what you said. Farm software, all sorts of stuff. Yeah,
I have that in this room somewhere. I'll hold it up. That actually is kind of neat. That, I mean, unfortunately, the Apple III didn't have enough. It had so little stuff that you could fit it in this little pamphlet. But it is actually kind of neat to have that list, because it has a lot of these sort of obscure business software, listed in it. And in fact, actually, the first one had a pretty funny name. The one I have here is just like Apple III Resource Guide or something like that. But the first one was like, "What can someone please tell me what I can do with the Apple III?" I think is what it was called.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
There was. Oh, someone asked about what the RAM issue was in MAME. I'm kind of remembering. So the thing that was keeping my memory of this is vague, but the thing that was making the Apple III emulators not work. So there was a kind of a main one called Sarah, Sarah OS X, I think, and then MAME also had a version of this, but sort of working from the documented stuff. But I mean, essentially, I think it had to do with it had to do with how it treated the zero page reads, I think, or something like that. That there was some sort of condition under which, if you're reading something from the zero page, it would add in a bank reference or something, so that the emulators were all reading from the wrong place in memory. And once they sort of understood what the interaction was between this like somewhat rare condition and the byte that indicated what the bank was, that made it so that it was reading what it was expecting, and the things worked. So. Does that sound right to anyone who knows? Something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was that's part of the Apple III. Like, I mean, the memory ability and design of it is quite a bit more powerful, isn't it? You know, you can move the 0 page anywhere in memory. There's a register to set that. You could set that anywhere in memory. And then there's an alternate stack, and it uses some funny XOR arrangement. So the stack's sort of the page before or after where you set the 0 page. So stuff like that is quite interesting that the Apple III had that, and Apple probably didn't want to bring that through into the 2E or something like that because it changed the architecture too much. So yeah, but it was quite complicated, I think, to get sorted in MAME.
Yeah, the actual memory scheme is pretty interesting. You know, they managed to get sort of like more than 8-bit memory addressing out of an 8-bit processor. But the thing is, so there's the complication of this kind of like, you know, banked paged memory or whatever. But there's like over top of that complication, which was documented, there was this like edge case where it sort of behaved. It was like the documentation was ambiguous, and it behaved in the way you didn't expect it to behave. So,
yeah.
Let's see.
So there's a question regarding the external floppy connector, the 3 and the 3 Plus. Yeah, and that one's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the 3 Plus has that 25-pin D connector, and that matches with what the Duo disk has on it. And then you can actually plug the Duo disk directly in. If you have a 25-pin straight-through connector, you can plug that straight in the back of the Apple III. And the other bit that was interesting with that is that the Apple III has a capability to determine if the disk has been switched. So there's some extra circuitry on the actual analog board on the drive, so that if you pull a floppy out and put the floppy in, you can detect that with software. And the Duo disk actually has that extra circuitry on it, and all Duo disks out there look like they have it. So that's probably something that was very rarely used, but it seems like they sold a fair few Duo disks because they seem to be around a bit. So yeah.
That's cool. I did not know that. See, that's I think what I like about the Apple III is that it's kind of like this whole kind of unmapped territory.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it would be pretty easy to find a Duo disk in an Apple III, and you could make the adapter that goes, you know, the other way, presumably.
Yeah, I think you must be able to. I think someone must have been an adapter you could buy to do that, I would have thought, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Apple. I don't know what the rationale was for changing the connector, but it is kind of annoying that so the internal connector on a 3 Plus is like the regular ones, like it's just like the old ones, and the external one has this other shape.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember. I think you can. Maybe not. What I was trying to remember is whether you could plug something into the motherboard to take over that port in the back, but I think you can't. I think you need an adapter to get drive 2 and up on an Apple III Plus. Does that seem right?
I think so. Yeah.
I don't think the adapter is very complicated, but
no,
but
it's just changing the pin out somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're hard to. It's hard to find the original ones. Yeah, I think all of the I'm looking at a comment from Kat that says, I thought all the internal connectors in the 3 had extra pins for the disk change switch, and they all do. I mean, like the Apple III has I think like 4 extra pins over the Apple II, but
the disk change actually, and that's something I need to write something about that. The disk change actually uses the it doesn't use any extra pins for the disk change. It actually it monitors, if you look at the circuitry, it monitors the write protect switch on the disk, And if you pull that out, there's a couple of extra flip-flops on the hardware, and if you pull that out, it cycles the write protect switch, and it actually blocks the read signal from coming out. So that if you switch the disk and you're trying to read from that drive, you can't get any data. It's like the disk is not in. And then I think the Apple III there's some way to reset that condition. I can't remember what it was. And then you try and read from the disk again. And if you get data, then you know that the disk has been switched. Some complicated way that they did it. And there's actually an extra signal that feeds out on, and actually, sorry, that is the extra signal is to put it in Apple II mode so that it turns that off, because in Apple II mode, if you switch the disk, it would stop from working. Something like that. Yeah, it's a bit of a crazy mechanism.
That's cool. Yeah, I'd heard, I knew about the fact that it could detect disk switching, but I didn't know how it worked. That's cool. Michael asked in the chat about whether the text mode is laid out in the same way as on an enhanced 2E. I myself only kind of learned about that recently, just because I was trying to make a list of all the graphics modes, and I think so. It's possible that I'm not the right person to answer this, but I was surprised at how close most of the modes were to two modes. They use the same. There's 400 and 800 and 2000 and 4000 are all important, locations. I think the 80 column text mode in the Apple III actually uses both 400 and 800, unlike the 2E, which uses 400 in a different bank.
Yeah, that's the fundamental difference, I think, between them. Yeah, it uses 400 and 800 rather than 400 and some alternate copy of 400. Yeah.
MAME works pretty well too, if you want to play with this stuff and can't find an Apple III.
Yeah. Does that like the 400 and the 800? Does that mean that it's more of a logical layout where it's not interleaving every second column from two different areas, but it's kind of more like 400 covers, I don't know, the top half of the screen and 800 covers the bottom half? Is it just more like a straightforward layout?
No, it's exactly the same. Yeah,
really?
It's
actually
exactly the same.
It interleaves the stuff. I guess that might have been for some degree of hardware compatibility. Paul, I was having a few thoughts about some of the topics that you guys were raising a little earlier, so that's why I wanted to just jump in. I don't have a 3. I've hardly ever used one, but just a couple of thoughts I wanted to share. Because Rob, you were talking about how that Australian accounting package for the 3 and how it could never have sold very many copies, and it started me thinking. It's a different ecosystem. Like the Apple II is this mass market. It's wild and woolly. You can sell. You throw a game out there and it goes viral and the whole world buys it, and you're on Easy Street. Whereas with the Apple III, it was so tightly controlled, undocumented. They were playing their cards very close to their chest. Steve Jobs was telling the design team to do dumb things with the design, and the price was really high. It was at least 4 times more expensive than getting an Apple II, and so it was big dollar investment, low volume, and same thing with the accounting package. Probably you could charge, I don't know, you could. Back then, you could have charged maybe $500 for the software, and that was just the beginning. You would charge annual support on the software. You would sell consulting services around the software. So you only needed maybe 50 clients, and they became your clients. It wasn't just a transaction; it was a relationship. You'd sell your accounting package, and they would continue putting money into your piggy bank, every month, every year after that. So you could probably it could support its own different kind of ecosystem, very, very, very different economics from the Apple II line. And the other thought that I had was around, you were talking about the farmer's software and the dentist software, and with games, on the Apple II, everybody loves playing the games. There's a lot of attention and a lot of intense effort into tracking down and preserving and documenting and packaging up into total replay. A lot of energy there. With the farming software, it's like, who cares? You know, like who cares enough about preserving farming software to want to invest that kind of effort? And so it's apart from just sort of the archival, just the need to archive, the need to preserve in general, but not maybe the specific niche interest in what that software actually does. Anyway, just wanted to share those with the group.
Sure. Mike, yeah.
I just happened to spy a question on the Discord from X56. He was talking about power supplies and wanted to know, would a failed power supply likely cause other damage or just not work? I know failure modes can be more severe on certain machines, which I think he might be referring to the Commodore, which is pretty notorious for just taking out everything when its power supply starts to fail.
I'm lucky enough that I have not had that happen, but the probably good thing about the power supply is that, I mean, the only way I could take everything out is if it sent a surge or something, because it's pretty physically isolated. Does that seem right to anyone who's had power supplies fail? Yeah.
Maybe that's an answer. Maybe they never fail.
Well, I think they do.
I'm kidding.
The capacitors do go.
Fail.
But yeah, and actually, I just forgotten to actually look at the Discord. I should have done that. But and actually, it's occurring to me that we're bumping up pretty close to the end of the time that we have here. But so it probably within a few minutes we'll need to stop, so we reset a little bit for the beginning of the actual sessions. But we can continue in the Discord. This has been great to have a chance to kind of like talk to everybody. But and I guess I was going to say about the archiving thing. Yeah, I mean, I think that I often worry about that. I think that's the same kind of concern comes up with like educational software or business software on the Apple II. I guess, Mike, you've done some of the like Internet Archive metadata work on the business stuff, and you know, yeah. I'm looking at you, but of course that doesn't translate.
Well, I'd love to take credit for things I didn't do, but no, I don't think so.
I thought there was a project a couple of years ago now. I thought I remember you were.
Oh, yeah, that was like yeah, I don't do that anymore. But generally, it was like a Python script that would what would it do? It would look through a source disk image and look for drivers loaded in there.
Oh, that, yeah.
Rate them and then kind of put them in a nice, easy to read format.
Right.
I think that was primarily it. And then as soon as I was on the Drop Your Answers podcast for that, and right afterwards, somebody fixed a logic error in there, and it was like, oh no. Yeah. I guess that happens.
But I mean, I guess as far as like archiving things like the farm software or whatever, one feels like someone spent a lot of their life doing that. You know, like there's a sort of intrinsic value to finding those things. But it's true. Like I do not expect that I might run that dentist software once in the future. I have run it once already. And
it teaches you how to do your own work.
Yeah. And a lot of this stuff is not, I mean, like, there's not a lot of on-screen help, right? I mean, like, so they relied a lot on having manuals. So.
And of course, it's nothing exciting like you know, graphic representations of where all the molars are. It's all about setting up appointments and ordering supplies.
Yeah.
Pretty dull stuff.
Yeah.
It would be. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I actually recently just realized. So BPI has a accounting package that Apple distributed under their like actual Apple, packaging and stuff. And I just discovered that there are actually many modules. It's not just accounts. It's not just general accounting, but there's also accounts receivable, accounts payable, and all that stuff. The actual official Apple stuff, and I hadn't come across it.
Now that you've mentioned all the exciting software that's available for the 3, the accounting or the accounts receivable.
That's right.
We got both kinds of software here.
That's right. But that's the problem. I mean, like, there's 9 games for the computer, and then and then everything else is accounting.
Yeah.
All the games are on the ROBs, but this game it's not.
Yeah.
There's enough. I think there's enough interest here for at least one more episode of Drop 3 Inches.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think. I haven't talked to Mike for a while. So I'm not sure exactly what his idea is about that. But I think I would love to do more. I think there's by now plenty of stuff to talk about. So yeah. Okay.
Do you have the Apple III dealer demonstration 1980 disc image?
Possibly.
Brian Weiser saying on the Discord that he did it just now.
Okay. Yeah, there are a few little demo discs, and they're slightly different from each other, and it's worth imaging anything you have. But okay, I think I probably should kind of wrap this up, just so that we can go to. Well, so is someone else on the committee kind of ready to?
You still have about 8 minutes left in your time session. So,
well, what do you guys want to do? I mean, if you wanted to just like play trippy videos for a couple minutes, that's okay. But either way, we can keep talking, certainly.
Actually, Paul, there was one question from Michael Morrison. I'm not sure. Are you on the call already, Michael? Or?
Yep, I'm still here.
Oh, I see you. Yeah.
Did you get to ask about how the custom character set is able to be redefined?
Yeah, I think Carrie mentioned that earlier.
Rob.
Yeah.
Rob, who is married to Kerry. Yeah.
Yeah. My pseudonym now. Yeah.
So is that like fast enough to be able to use to actually make a game like you might like on the Commodore 64?
Yeah.
Redefine
so you can trying to remember how many screen holes. I think there's 16. So I think you can load 8. Maybe there's 64 actually. Yeah, I think you can load 8 characters per BBL period. That would be as many as you could do. So I think when the ROM starts up, it has 8 goes, does 8 characters at a time. I think.
But
however many it needs, so it can do 128 characters. Yeah.
So you're thinking if you were trying to draw a dynamic graphics image, a moving graphics image by redefining the custom character set on the fly, is that what you're thinking, Michael?
I think that's what Michael's.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
Sounds like it might be a little too slow maybe to handle every use case.
So that horses demo, the classic demo for the Apple III, the horses one, it had 5 different horses predefined in the character set, and then just switch the actual the text character on the text screen so that it showed the different character set.
It's a little bit like with the Apple II, where you've got the pre-shifted shapes for horizontal animation for arcade games and things. So you're taking a similar approach to that, where you're just setting up a small number of variations and cycling through them. So if you hoard your resources very carefully, you might be able to make it work. But it doesn't sound like it would be fast enough to just do anything, instantly.
Yeah, it would require some pre-planning, but I think you have the opportunity to do kind of impressively fast graphical things if you don't look under the hood. Like if you don't realize that that's a whole character that's changing. But it's a little bit like doing a palette shift or something, I suppose. It's kind of instant. Once you switch that character, then it's now all of those dots are different.
And is the color information per character cell stored somewhere else, or is that actually stored with the character?
So there's really only there's one color text mode. I think it's the 40 column text mode. So the 400 page holds the text, and the 800 page holds the foreground background color for each character. So that's probably all you can use for that color mode for this character set.
So for each character cell, there will just be one foreground and one background color, but each adjacent characters can have different a different pair of colors.
Right.
Yeah, it's per character, foreground,
Okay,
background, and it's one of the 16 colors, Apple colors, or black included.
Yeah.
The horses demo showed that as well, with the horses running past the borders of these squares that stayed constant.
That's right. Yeah,
You can do that on the Apple too. I've got an Apple Color 100, and I've never tried it, but it supports the same thing. It doesn't. The character set's in ROM, of course, but you do have foreground and background colors in 80 column mode, where you each, and you've got a palette of 16 colors to work from. But how much software? You can't sell a software package for a few $100s and tell people to go and buy a $1,000 monitor at the same time just so they can have colored text.
Yeah.
Interesting. I've never seen that.
You can do that.
You can try.
Antoine asked if there was ever a 3.5-inch disc for the Apple III, and the Lyron card and the Unidisc worked, and On3 made a driver for it. So I think this might have been largely after Apple exited the Apple III, but On3 sort of brought the 3.5-inch drive to the Apple III, I believe. I think it's their driver. Yep. So certainly that sort of post the stuff that had to do with like people kind of using the machine after Apple dumped it. On3 was pretty big into that, and there were hard drive. There was I think you could get a CMC hard drive and a Unidisc plugged in, and so. Okay, let's see. I think I'm getting a little tense about the time, so this has been great. Though it's been a lot of fun just having everyone here. Sorry, Jorma, that I feel like you didn't have much time to talk here, but Jorma's been doing some great work, trying everything out and reporting on it and imaging
archiving.
Yeah,
that's been really good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but so I guess we probably should start demoting the all of you from the panelist window. But thank you for getting up.